time off to get involved in this campaign. They talked me into being on a panel, and then they made a pitch to me about being involved in it. And I had the time to do it, and I wanted to do it because I'm concerned about something called the mass incarceration of people of darker color. I don't like to say whites and people of color, because white is a color, and so I try to change the discussion a little bit. So I got to tell you my bias. Alternatively, though, I don't personally use drugs. I've been drug-free for a long time, since my preteen years. And I grew up in the Hilltop area of Tacoma, and there was so much drugs around in the Hilltop area of Tacoma when I grew up. It was crazy. You know, parents that allowed their kids to camp out overnight in the hood, made a mistake. Because when we did that, we had stuff that no kid should have at that age, 8 years old, 9 years old. So, but I have been drug-free for most all of my life. So I'm not for this because I just hit something that, I'm not for it because I'm a user. Philosophically, actually, I'm against the use of marijuana. That's my religious philosophical position. But I am for the medical use of it. So my conservative grandfather, ultra-conservative grandfather, these kinds of matters, smoking when he was going through his cancer treatment, didn't really want anybody to see him. That really did something for me too. You know, I would defend the right of anybody like my grandfather to medically use it. Okay. I want you to keep 4 cases in mind. Case of Skeeter. Skeeter never caught smoking weed as a pre-teenager, drug-free since. A fictitious person, or Rastafaria. You like that name, don't you? That does something for you, doesn't it? Only smokes weed recreationally, now caught smoking it. About to face some consequences. I want you to keep in mind Gary Allen Livingston, record of crack possession. That person's caught smoking weed. We're going to come back to these later. Then I want you to have in mind Clifford Joseph Ayers Jr., long criminal record of small crimes, misdemeanors, lower level felonies. 2 years before, caught with weapons, big-time weapons, now caught smoking weed. Okay, keep those in mind. We're going to come to them at the end. Now, if anybody wants this PowerPoint, if you guys, like somebody takes out a piece of paper, big sheet, and circulates them, you guys write your emails very, very legibly, I will then do my best to email everybody this PowerPoint, so you won't have to take notes all the way through, okay? All right, keep those in mind. Now, here's the law. Here's the law. The measure will remove state law prohibitions against producing, processing, and selling marijuana, subject to licensing and regulation by the Liquor Control Board. It will allow limited possession of marijuana by persons aged 21 and over, and impose 25% excise taxes on wholesale retail sales of marijuana, earmarking revenue for purposes, and sending them to a lot of places, including the University of Washington. I don't know why they didn't name the community college. We're always the last ones to get named. And it will let me just read it. Laws prohibiting driving under the influence would be amended to include maximum thresholds for THC blood concentration. So this is how the law is going to read in the voters pamphlet explanation part. It's not how the law will read on your ballot. It reads shorter than this on the ballot. Okay. What? Yes? What'd I do? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
I was just wondering.
Thank you so much.
I was just wondering for blood, they're gonna take a blood test every time you get
pulled over.
They'll have to. They can't do that in the field, from what I understand.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
They will have to take you somewhere to have that happen. But what it does is it specifies an amount that would be considered under the influence. And that is, it's sort of new. It is definitely new to the opposition, and they're saying, why would you support something like that? There are people who are pro the decriminalization and legalization of marijuana who don't like this initiative because of that reason alone. They feel like it adds specificity, a clear, bright line to what is considered under the influence or impaired. And they said before this, they would have to prove it. Why would you agree to that? That's why so many prosecutors are signing on to it. They're working with folks to pass this. The Yes campaign says that this really doesn't add to, it doesn't add that much really, to the body of law already. I guess their argument is mainly one of possession. This is the way I see it. If you're caught with a certain amount, you're going to be held to be liable anyway. And so it really doesn't matter that that's in there. I found this to be sort of a compelling argument. I ran into the person that heads the no part of the campaign for just that reason alone, because he's concerned about patients medically taking it, some of whom have a high threshold for pain and use a lot of marijuana or marijuana or cannabis-laden products, various type liquid or whatever. And he feels like some of my folks who are functional and not under the influence when they're driving will be considered in violation of the limit because of this alone. I found it to be a significant argument. And it kind of shook me a little bit in my support for this. But on balance, I still support it. It's a concern though. Whose hand's up the longest? Okay, good. 1, 2, yes.
So I heard, I'm not 100% sure about this, but I did hear that they can determine your THC blood concentration without actually drawing blood. They can use a saliva test.
Yeah.
Okay.
I heard that.
Okay.
24/7.
Well,
And they could probably do that in the field. Yes, go ahead,
Okay.
Richard.
No, this is actually, I would maintain, simply a lie on the
Okay.
behalf of the No campaign.
Okay.
What 502 will do is it will mandate the police use a new blood test that is able to discriminate between residual THC in someone's system, because THC is fat soluble and can be in your system for up to 30 days, and active THC that is actually making you high in the moment. And so that just being able to discriminate and forcing the police to discriminate between active THC and residual THC, that's actually a huge improvement in the law. And but the reason the no people the reason I say that they're lying about this is that they're assuming somehow that everyone who drives is suddenly going to be getting a blood test. And that's not how this works. Police would pull you over if you seem to be driving erratically. Someone who is not driving erratically is not going to get pulled over. And if you are driving erratically, well, then you're driving erratically. So, and like you were saying, it doesn't change the fact that people, including patients, are already subject to the standing influence, driving under the influence laws, which don't discriminate between active and residual. So it actually is a radical improvement in the law for patients. And I'm just, as a moral philosopher, I am disgusted that the No campaign actually makes this argument.
Okay, that's very helpful hearing that. I still found the arguments compelling because I know from how law develops and how it's interpreted that usually something like that is just not a throwaway. There will be a need to add extra clarification, and that's why they would be put in there. But I still feel on balance, it's a good thing. The threshold will be high enough that you would have to have a lot of THC in your system in order to run afoul of the law. And the implication they make is a type of a collusion. They're basically arguing the reason why prosecutors are for this is a prosecution law. The reason why prosecutors are for it is because the Yes campaign is complicit with them in putting this thing together, not so much to decriminalize marijuana, but to prosecute more people. And I think that's just wrong. I think that's just wrong. And
Wrong to interpret it that way, or wrong?
I don't see the collusion. I don't think that prosecutors are really pushing the strips so that they can get more cases. That is a big issue to me, because remember, my reason for being for this is because I'm against mass incarceration. But I am really listening to their arguments, because I don't want to be just, I want to be closed-minded on it, and I don't want to be naive, and, you know, we'll make sure we're right on this. I got to see how it's going to be used. Sometimes you got to be careful, because you never intended something to be used a certain way, but folks will come in and they'll kind of use it that way, and courts will let them, and then it turns out to be something that you don't want it to be. So I'm glad they're making the argument. I don't think they're mostly right, but I found it compelling.
So there's a question there,
Yeah.
and a question there.
That was two things.
Mhm.
First of all, to the statement from the gentleman there that you won't get pulled over unless you're driving erratically, unless of course you're in a stop and frisk zone. And then I think that also would tie into the idea that if it would give the police more impetus to pull people over, because under the guise of, or the pretext of checking for THC.
Only if they have a lot of extra money to pay for the blood draws and the test.
They'll have to have, if you're driving, and they come, turn the lights on, or some kind of way signal that you need to stop to pull you over, that is a stop. And they have to have at least what they call an articulable suspicion, if not probable cause, that you have violated a crime before they can make that stop. If they don't do that, then whatever are the fruits of that stop, that's supposed to be prophylactically removed so it's not used against you. That's how it's supposed to work. And but you know, listen, I love opposition like this because it helps us get things right. Sometimes we miss something when we're push something through, and these are the kind of arguments we need to be making before we consider something like that. Okay, let me see if I can't get through it. What the law does not do, it does not legalize marijuana, nor decriminalize it generally. The law is limited in three ways: in age, amount, and access. Age, amount, and access. All right, so let's say more about that. Number one, it applies to those 21 and over. They can purchase 1 ounce of usable marijuana. This is straight from the Yes on 502 campaign, and I think this is them pulling parts of the legislation itself. 1 ounce of usable marijuana, 16 ounces of marijuana-infused products, 72 ounces of liquid, and I think an ounce now, I don't know, an ounce, how many joints would that, a normal size? Normal size joints. That's a lot of joints. So you get the point? Basically that means a lot of joints now have been decriminalized for the purchase. Again, now I'm not for the use, but I'm just trying to calm down those people who are saying, they trying to take my joints. There's a lot of them that you can, okay? And now you got to purchase it from licensed stores whose advertising is limited, because we don't want to have all these neon signs. You know what I mean? Marijuana.
Like we used to with cigarettes.
Marijuana are us. Marijuana is us. What now?
Like we used to with cigarettes.
Yeah. Okay. Whose hand was up the longest?
Yeah.
Okay, 1, 2. Yeah.
Wait, so for 72 ounces of marijuana-infused product in liquid form, does that mean you could have like 72 ounces of like oil? Because that's enough to get everybody in this room really, really stoned. So,
What are you talking about?
Like,
72 ounces of oil.
they have
Olive
like
oil?
Oh, I got
oil
it.
like infused with
I
like
got it.
cannabis is really.
Yeah, I mean that's language straight from the law, is what I'm saying.
That's not even really.
But again, it makes the point. But it makes the point to those who feel like this is not legalizing enough for those medically using it. It makes the point that this is a lot of stuff you're allowed now to possess. It's a lot of stuff. You picture this: a police officer comes, stops you. What do you have in your hand? What is that big bag? what is that 55-gallon barrel you're putting? And you can, if you're within those limits, you're good. And the way the law reads, it says some combination of all this. So you could have like half an ounce, you got me, 36, so that some combination works. Yeah.
So this lady here, oh, you're next.
Okay, yes.
And then here.
I heard
then over
that if this were to pass, that they'd shut down all the dispensaries in Seattle, and there'd only be one for medical patients in Tacoma, which I thought was weird, and I came here actually to ask about that, because I just thought that it wouldn't make sense, like some lady in like Edmonds or something who wants her medicine has to like drive all the way to Tacoma.
What's going to happen if this passes is, you know how the liquor stores are? You get like a license. What this does is like what happened coming out of Prohibition. These stores, and you had a lot, now you got a lot of alcohol stores in an average-sized city. And you can go and buy the amounts you need, and we're going to tax a piece, send some of it to different places like rehab clinics and stuff like that, and University of Washington, somebody make an argument for Seattle Central. And we'll get a little economic benefit from it. It'll be regulated to take it completely above, or hopefully, much more above ground. And that's where you can even buy your medical stuff.
Well, it does leave medical untouched though,
Yeah.
so the dispensaries legally do not change. They're threatened by market forces, not by the law.
Oh, so in effect, because of the market force,
Yes.
because of greater supply.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay, I got you. Yep.
Was that, the limits were not for, I'm wandering around Seattle with 72 ounces of oil, is that also for in-home? The police come to your house and
Yep.
they can talk to you about your quantities at home as well?
Now, when you have a license to like have a plant, I believe all of that stuff is the same as, it won't be, that won't change. Now, that's to the best of my knowledge. Richard, you know anything
Medical
different
does
on
not
that?
change.
Okay.
All the medical stays exactly as it is. Patients can keep all of the rights they have under the medical system. It just layers this on top of the.
Okay.
Sure.
All right.
So
you can still have.
Go back one? Back one.
But
Okay, because you know I'm gonna make these available, I'm gonna get it to you.
And you broke your patient.
She's still
yes.
asking her question here.
Oh,
and then
okay.
her.
Who?
Did you finish asking your question?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
I can have a liquor cabinet at home and I can have vodka and gin and whatever, you know
Yeah,
what I mean?
yeah.
So, but can I have a weed cabinet at home? Can I
With
have
like,
Kush
with
and
bricks and
whatever?
bricks and bricks, no ma'am,
Not bricks, but.
no ma'am.
Okay.
So the limit is at home as well?
Yeah, but you know you're limited like that now, right?
Well, I mean, I don't even, you know, I don't play this game, so.
Okay, who else?
Here.
Yes.
Mine is very similar, I think, to previous question of like, what's to stop someone from going to one store, getting an ounce, going to another store, getting an ounce. It's just that it's illegal, and if you get caught,
Right, your problem will be
You suffer.
possession.
possession. Okay.
Right.
Right.
Because it's not a matter of saying you can, as long as you can prove you only got that amount from one store, you're good. It's a possession thing. And if you possess amounts in excess of that, you're in trouble.
So, and
Those
that's
criminal laws come out.
that's even possession on myself as well as what I have at home or stored throughout Seattle.
Yeah,
if I was-
except for the medical stuff, and then they got
Except
different
for that.
regulations regarding that.
Okay.
Yep.
I was gonna ask if they schedule them, like they do narcotics, like schedule A, B, C, or whatever, to, kind of distinguish what's medical and what's personal.
This doesn't change the medical stuff, so that already has its laws that apply to it. There still is that schedule of amounts that lead to certain punishments. This comes in and changes it regarding those that meet these requirements. But if you miss those requirements, you fall afoul of those, and your punishments are according to that schedule based on what can be proven by a prosecutor against you.
So
Yep.
this man here, and
Oh,
then
yes.
then her.
No, it wasn't.
Yes.
No, not you.
Yeah, I was just wondering, like, who would be growing it? Because, like, right now with the laws, with medical marijuana, I think you can actually buy your own plants and grow them at home. will you be able to, like, when it's legalized, how will that work? I mean, will the government be growing it, or could you actually go and buy your own
From
plant?
what I understand, now, Richard, you stay close to me on this, and if you know, you can, first let me take a stab at
If
it.
it's anything like
First, let me take a
alcohol,
stab at it.
yes.
From what I understand, these are gonna be licensed, private providers, growers, providers, okay, who are going to, have to be regulated by, you know, regulators and all this stuff. And they probably still have to work out all of that. Usually what happens is you'll have a state law, and then there'll be an administrative agency with rulemaking authority. And then it'll pass a whole bunch of rules regarding it. That will be 2 to 3, 10 times the length. Did you want to make your point real quick?
Oh,
before you
well,
take
yeah,
off?
I mean, if it's like alcohol, you're not allowed to like brew tequila in your house, right? Like you have to, like
You have to
people
have
aren't allowed to
license.
like make moonshine and stuff, right? So if it's like,
You can make some dry one, actually.
yeah, so if it's controlled, like if they're controlling it the same way liquor is, it would make sense if under this law, you're not allowed to grow it unless you're licensed, basically.
Okay.
And the licenses are separate. The growers cannot be sellers. You have to have separate licenses.
Okay. All right. Let's make a little bit more progress, and then I want to get
Did you
to
get-
your hands. This is good. Main groups for it. New Approach Washington is like the platform group for it, and you saw that picture of Ms. Holcomb. I said her husband's former SCC grad and all. She's the director of New Approach Washington's campaign. Then there's the Washington State Democratic Central Committee has come out in support of it. And they're not actively working to help organize the campaign. They're just a big supporter. It was just a big get, you know what I mean, to have them come out and say they're for this thing. So they're endorsers. You got the Drug Policy Alliance, offer assistance. You got LEAP, law enforcement, what is the A?
Enforcement
Against prohibition, and they are really for legalization. What's powerful about this is they got former chiefs of police in the organization. Of course, police officers and sheriffs and all. But to hear a chief of police come out and make an argument for legalization is powerful. So I was on a panel in which the international head of LEAP was there, and he was a former chief of police, and he did a good job arguing why we need laws like this and why this is just the beginning. We got to go further than this. NORML, which has been the main group for the legalization of marijuana, one of the main ones nationally, and you got a lot of users in NORML. And the Seattle NAACP, James Bible, a friend of mine, is coming out for this. Leaders like John McKay, you see him up here, he was a moderate Republican city attorney. Remember, the Bush administration came after him because he was moderate, not in the Federalist Society. And he's come out for it. U.S. former U.S. attorney. Current Seattle City attorney Pete Holmes has come out for it. That was a good thing to see because many of us in the African American community were hurt that he brought charges against the police officer Ballard. And we made because I remember he was jumped, that police officer was jumped after this. He confronted a woman that had taken his coat and his colleague's coat from a club out in, or like a sports bar in Ballard. And he was jumped, they were beating him. He had his gun on him, didn't pull it out. They were whooping him, they jumped him. The guys that didn't like that he was talking to this woman and holding her said, no, you're under arrest, you're not going anywhere. And they brought charges because when they finally got done, after they beat him pretty good, he saw one of them kind of lift up a little, and he just went like this, get down. And that did it. Now they let all those other people go, but when the African American guy did it, now Pete Holmes will bring charges. So we told him, we don't want you to make him the example. And he got off in his case, but that hurt us, set us back. I went and talked to him when he was at the Rick Steves spoke up at University of Washington, and they had a private reception And I just came up to him and I said, hey man, we need to try to work this out. I'm really glad that you're supporting this campaign. And so we're kind of talking about that. Former police chief Norm Stamper was in a private meeting with him. Man, he got a new book out. Well, I got something. You wait till you see what I got on him. Just a second. Former Spokane Regional Health District Director, Dr. Kim Marie Thorburn, right there in the picture, has come out for this. And then you see the newspapers. All right. And I guess I could have just read the sign. It's law enforcement against prohibition. That's why I had to sign.
And both candidates for sheriff.
Say that again now.
Both candidates for sheriff.
Do you have all this memorized, Bridget? You need
Only
to
two
be
in the
up
campaign,
here.
I had them.
Groups against it. The No on I-502 campaign, Patients Against New Approach Washington, Sensible Washington, Washington Association of Sheriffs and Police Chiefs. That's the larger group in the state of police officers who are, and they're against it. Washington Association for Substance Abuse and Violence Prevention. Christine Gregoire has come out against it. So have the two main leaders, candidates for governor. Soft on Jay Inslee. So he's like, I'm not so sure this is going to. So he wasn't real adamantly against it, but that was enough. That was enough to put him on the no side. And HempFest, executive director of Seattle HempFest, Vivian McPeak. However, the Seattle HempFest itself said we are not going to take a position. But its executive director kind of disappointed in that, came out and said, well, I'm against it. So I don't like this. I don't like, he didn't like the blood level thing that we spent time talking about. And is concerned that it's going to affect medical marijuana patients. All right, and then you see the newspapers and local clergy. I know some of them. Emerald City Outreach Ministries. Oh man, I'll picture this here. Anyway, he's on Raider Avenue. There's some black pastors even that are against him. Okay, interesting facts. Founders like George Washington grew hemp. How many of y'all knew that? What does that mean? What does that, the father of our country? Let's leave that alone. General perception. You know, he did it because he didn't like that Britain was regulating so many products. And he felt controlled and he felt like we need to take a stand against this. And he tried to find some of the things that were not on the schedule of things that Britain was controlling. One was hemp, and I'm done. The general perception that marijuana is a gateway drug. And this general perception is amazing. Sometimes you can just keep repeating something to people, and even if it's against the facts, even if it's against the best of the studies, there are many people that will believe it just because it was repeated. What's the big example of that? That Saddam Hussein somehow was involved in September 11th. Bush he would connect those two things. He would speak against what happened September 11th and then go straight to Saddam Hussein. And in the minds of many Americans, that meant that Bush had information that supported that he was involved, and that's just what they believed. Usage has been part of American culture for a long time. If you go back to the jazz period of like the 1920s, okay, you're going to find some usages, some marijuana use. Of course, though, the 60s and 70s culture and all of that stuff. Okay, there are major studies showing marijuana is not dangerous or a gateway drug. Those who, I'll put it this way, many medical professionals say that there's no documented death due to overdose or overusage. No documented death. Like we have in the tens of thousands plus for cigarettes, alcohol. How many of y'all know that you can even die from drinking too much water? Isn't that crazy? No documented deaths, though, for those smoking too many blunts all in a row. Hey, listen, I am not endorsing this. U.S. classifies marijuana in the worst category, of dangerous addictive drugs. That's Schedule 1. There are five. We're going to talk about that in just a second. All right, here we go. Major research in laws. You got the Comprehensive Drug Abuse Prevention and Control Act of 1970. It developed those 5 levels for classifying substances, and it said we're going to temporarily put marijuana in this law, subject to the Schaefer Commission's report. Then the Schaefer Commission's report came out in '72. Medical and other professionals in the field, Nixon had called it. This is a high-level commission. Nixon wanted this commission to conclude that marijuana was dangerous, marijuana was addictive, marijuana was a gateway drug. On each of those fronts, they concluded the opposite. Nixon lobbied Schaefer when he began to hear that that was going to be their findings. He lobbied him further when they revealed those as their preliminary findings. You can go and look this up and find some of the things he said, and yet they were still strong enough to come out and say, no, it's not a dangerous drug. That should have settled it. That should have settled the whole issue, but it didn't. They did not take marijuana off of the worst category of drugs under the Comprehensive Drug Abuse Prevention and Control Act of 1970. Somebody explain to me why. I think there's a reason. I'll hint at it later. Okay? Richard, do you want to
I
take
never want
that?
to comment on that, but I did want to just comment that the other reason for challenging these things is that having marijuana scheduled that way is really undermining of people's respect for the government. Because the government's clearly just doing and saying things that are obviously ridiculous. You know, and how are you supposed to have respect for that? But government has an important role in our lives.
Yep.
So it's
Yes. But I think the effects on certain people are even more pernicious than that. I mean, it's we are developing a tertiary level, a third level class of citizenship of incarcerated or post-incarcerated, re-incarcerated people, revolving door, and their lives are, their living is greatly diminished. Greatly diminished. I'll come back to that in a little bit. All right, you got the director of the Office of National Drug Control Policy, the drug czars, right? Maintaining the position, president after president, that marijuana is a gateway drug, its use must be prosecuted. Every drug czar. Current drug czar in there is former chief of police in Seattle, Gil Kurlikowski. He's lightly saying the same thing. There's been no change at the national level. Strange to me. Strange to me. The National Institute on Drug Abuse states this. This is an organization that works underneath the auspices of the drug czar. Marijuana is the most commonly abused illicit drug in the United States. Has an adverse impact on learning and memory, and every time they can find any study, they bring it in there. And then they shade the studies like the National Commission on Marijuana and Drug Abuse by saying, well, there are some scholars that say. That's about how they nuance it so that it doesn't look totally anti-intellectual. And they're basically making a conservative argument that supports the war on drugs, that keeps marijuana a Schedule 1 illegal controlled substance and controlled substance. All right, 2009 National Institute of Health study came out with this. Cannabinoids have been recognized to have potential anti-tumor properties. That is a big problem for those conservatives. In study after study, marijuana either comes up kind of in a mixed situation where they're not so sure that it has a negative impact. Some saying it does make people a little lazy. I ain't gotta make that argument too hard. Some of y'all who know people that smoke a lot of marijuana, you want to tell, hey, you need to get up and look for a job again. You know, and it does keep you addicted to the toes. Cheetos, Doritos, and Fritos. They're the schedules. Schedule 1 is going to include some of the hardest, worst, toughest drugs. These are the drugs or other substance that has a high potential for abuse. No current accepted medical use, a lack of accepted safety for use, and here you're going to find heroin in its most refined form, and some of just the worst drugs. They got marijuana on that list. Over here, you got some of the milder form of the opiates, Schedule 5. They don't even put it in Schedule 5. You know, because we use the opiates a lot in medical treatment for those dealing with pain and stuff like that, right? You don't realize it, but yeah, when you're in the hospital and stuff like that, you're getting some opiates, okay? They just call it medicine. And you just say, that I'm feeling a lot better right now. Okay? They don't even put it in that category 5. National Survey on Drug Use and Health, according to the National Survey on Drug Use and Health 2009, 16.7 million Americans aged 12 or older used marijuana at least once in the month prior to being certain. And it's gotten worse since it was when they looked at it 2002 to 2008. Whites and non-whites use marijuana at comparable rates. Blacks are arrested at like 3+ times rate of whites. That's the problem. It's not enough, though, that it makes us rise up and say something about this war on drugs. So we've got the study saying the usage of this controlled substance is comparable across the ethnic groups, and yet it's used as a major corraler of people in prison. And to me, since we're brothers and sisters and we're comrades and compatriots, we should be defending each other on that. Folks that look like me need you. Where are you at?
Where are we,
Need you to come and say something about this. Yep.
where are we doing these studies at?
Doing what study?
These studies that's coming up with these,
Oh, this right, to get those numbers? They do a survey, and as long as they keep it anonymous, they got high school students that'll go ahead and tell the truth. We think, we hope.
That's what I'm saying,
And so
It's the
they
government.
test them in certain places, and have been testing. They come up with this. This is similar to the types of studies we've done. So you can go check this out, the National Survey on Drug Use and Health.
Yeah, and we've got reference librarians on duty to
Look at
help
that.
you.
Who can get you those studies.
Yeah.
In the last handful of years, half of all arrests of Black Americans have been for marijuana possession. This is something I got from Allison Holcomb. So I got to go get her numbers. One of the things I wanted to firm up a little bit more, just an important statistic. I got the notebook right here with statistics in it, but I didn't get around to actually finding the specific site on that. So, and that's what really brings us to this subject. All right, schools of thought on this. The traditional school, that takes you back a little bit. Limited acceptance of hemp, some toleration of marijuana use, and I'm going back now to 1700s, 1800s, early 1900s. The conservative position on this, really about post 1968. No toleration, marijuana dangerous and a gateway drug. And that goes back to Nixon and war on drugs. He really coined and launched the war on drugs. You got the neoconservative position. Ignore state acceptance of medicinal use, but don't be too hard on it. Most of the neocons, and now I'm talking about somewhat Reagan, his second term and stuff. I'm talking about Bush. Clinton was a neocon on this subject. And Obama, to a little degree, he's doing Clinton. Obama's domestic policy in his first term has basically been Clinton's first term. Obama's foreign policy in his first term was Bush's last 2 years. The libertarian position, government has no right to tell an adult what to do with his or her own health, and life. That's the Ayn Rand's language, and it's also the Ron Paul position. I know that he's in the Republican Party, but he's really a libertarian. The progressive position, legalization, because marijuana is really not dangerous and it's not a gateway drug. McGovern was for that in '72. You know, he just died, right, George McGovern. And you got people like Norm Stanford. All right. Anybody, any questions on it? Yes, sir.
Just a comment, maybe just a question. Can you explain a little bit why Nixon launched the war on drugs? Is there something more going on there than just concern about drug use?
We don't know. Here's what we do have, though. I'm almost there. So I want to tell you, this is Norm Stanford. In a meeting about 7 months ago that I was in, ACLU's office, here's what he said. Basically, I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but this is what he said. He says, we now know why Nixon did the war on drugs. He was concerned about blacks and he developed a scheme to control them. It was revealed last year when Haldeman's diaries were made public. All right, well listen, I'm in the meeting. Other people went, and they just kept on letting. I'm like, hey, wait, time. Whoa, wait a minute. Because I got to find the sites. Because I'm going to go out in them streets and argue stuff. I'm going to go and speak some truth to the city council and the chiefs of police and stuff like that on behalf of some people. I said, man, wait, can you help me find that? Bam. In the Haldeman's book that came out in 2011, there it is. This is in his diary. Got into a deep discussion of welfare. He said, this would happen on this day. Who was Haldeman? I think he was Nixon's chief of staff, something like that. Got into a deep discussion of welfare, trying to think out the family security decision with E. E is Ehrlichman, and me. Welfare reform had not been one of P's campaign issues. That is, the president. P, the president, Nixon, emphasized that, what date is this now? It's 1969, y'all. This is before that act is passed, before the commission is called. P, the president, emphasized that you have to face the fact that the whole problem is really the blacks. The key is to devise a system that recognizes this while not.
Right.
Now, I'm sure for some of y'all, you need more than that. And that makes some sense too, because we've got to be scholarly and all that. That's the best I can give you. That's the best I get. But I'm just telling you, I wanted to know, although it's going to leave some still not sure that there was something to file with this, that's about all I need. And when I go back to the people that I know and show them this, we got a problem. We got a big time problem. The key is to devise a system that recognizes this while not appearing to. And it's another sad thing, because a lot of times, it's why I like to get my students to read, to actually read the anti-fugitive slave clause in the Constitution, the 3/5 clause in the Constitution, and the slave trade protection clause in the Constitution. Because although the letters of the day called them Negroes, Negresses, and things like that, although the newspapers said that, and people said it in their common language, when they wrote the law, they wrote it in colorblind ways often. So that you would not know. Guess what the 3/5 clause said? And 3/5 of all other persons. Had someone not been steeped in history and the fact of that day, would have argued you down that dealt with black people. Well, read it. It doesn't say black people. There you go again. So you have to be steeped in the facts. You have to know exactly what's going on in order to determine whether or not it's racial and all that. All right. Problem with overall welfare plans that forces poor whites in the same position as blacks, so we don't want to push that too much because we don't want to hurt them. Feels we have to get rid of the veil of hypocrisy and guilt and face reality. That something is wrong with these people. And then he said something about, we're done? Okay. So I kind of want to end it there. Let me just say real quick. Skeeter is me. Never was arrested as a kid, but I did use it when I was 8, 9, and 10, 11 years old. What surprises me is how available it was. How available it was. And useful it is as a herding mechanism if you want to use it for that. You herd them right in the prison. And I'm glad I was in the trap, but I got out of it. but it makes me feel no better than the worst users right now. I am no better. And please don't call me Skeeter. That is okay, if you say Skeeter and you're in my class, I'm gonna be talking to the dean, because I'm telling right now. That's funny. That's a demerit right there. Rastafari, just a name I made. If you get caught and marijuana is your first offense, you're not likely to do jail time. Let's be honest and reasonable. They'll put you on a bracelet, they'll put you on probation. All right? Gary Allen Livingston, that's my brother. He already had a record. See, that's where it gets you, when you already have a record. And they're doing dragnet and policing these communities. Many of them have a record. And sometimes it's over something like resisting arrest, because they just threw the police. Man, I get so sick of this. And it's like, oh. Resisting arrest. That could be a felony. Cost him time in jail, lost that. And then guess who Clifford Joseph Harris Jr. is? That's the rapper T.I. And the only reason why it didn't cost him his marriage and a job and, you know what I mean? And all those things that just take so many people down, because he had all that money. All right, y'all. This is the reason why I'm supporting it, but you got to do what you think is the right thing. I'm done.
Thank you so much. We've got one announcement about next week. Sam just now.
Next week there's a presentation. Next week, next week's there's going to be a panel discussing the upcoming elections. If you have your ballots with you, bring them, because there's also going to be an event immediately following in the Student Event Center in BE 1110, put together by the Multicultural Services Office, and where they're going to kind of break each of the specific ballots down individually and give you more knowledge and information on what the pros and cons and the ramifications of each respective office and referendum and initiative mean.
And I'm hoping Dr. Livingston and Dr. Lawson will join me in being on that panel. We also hope to get a student, so if you're an active person and if you have an opinion on things, or you think you know a lot about the issues, come and tell me.
Thank you for coming. Oh, the list? Where's the list at? Make sure if you want me to send it to you, make sure you sign this. But I had enough. What's up, man? Thank you. Happy Eid. Okay.
and wine.
It's
But
kind of
yeah,
more
but
like
I mean,
the,
but you're not supposed to make your own hard liquor.
Nixon there.
A lower
Currently,
ratio
or
than somebody under girl lights or whatever anyways.
Yeah, man, I'm telling
So
you,
what I
man,
want, and I won't be,
it's had.
I
Yeah.
won't be happy until I can save my
I mean,
receipt
if
and that
if his
is
real,
what I want.
if
You
that
know
was
what I
not
mean?
Yeah,
just an
And so,
excitement
what
or
happened
frustrated,
I've been telling my niece, I
is
said,
why
and in fact
you
became
know, why that can't be
the
controlled, why should that be so,
uh,
if you're worried about.
Well, they want to
reason
free
for the war on drugs. That's what Stanford said. That's not me, I'm Stanford.
So,
They got
yeah,
me
and there are
there.
lots of, so there are lots of
Yeah.
elements are a different
Then,
position of
then,
what
it has worked
would be
really well.
fair, a good idea.
And it wasn't just him, it was every president
This was the one around
that has enforced it in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, man, I mean, what it has done, and when they didn't need weed, they had crack.
Right.
Then it was crack, they didn't have heroin.
We suck, you know what I mean,
Right.
like, that should change, like, not, I
Yeah.
don't think he was.
So I think they thought this was a useful compromise to get.
And, I'm not so sure.
And it's the same with the
that
DUI,
I'm right about
it's not that the people writing it were specifically excited.
But I like being like Patrick Henry.
They knew
that if I had to dare, I'd rather dare on neurotic.
And so this one, I think.
I'd rather err, because remember Patrick Henry, all he learns is that
Eliminate certain
the
sort of
Constitution is being put together in secrecy. And he goes, I smell a rat.
Well,
So to me, since he's part of the,
yeah, it's right there,
that it's American to resist this. It's American to make them prove that what they're trying to do is illegal. When I have any evidence, significant evidence, that it could be the wrong. And, you know, this is not innocent. I mean, this is not just a debating thing. This could be, if it is something sinister, and is in fact something
You
that
know, and
holds
I think
people
that
down.
with this transition over,
Yeah,
are
this
you on a
is-
federal
this is
list instead of a
serious
state
stuff.
list then, right?
So,
If you're a grower.
I'm just glad that it's
Yeah,
not.
think of, because we have lots, I've never known, got things pretty, I'm working for this quarter.
You get verified.
Plan and what.
It takes a physician authorized.
We can't go too far, just with our.
Some guys are still worried.
There's no list anymore.
Every Thursday, right now the schedule's.
It's the possibility, I mean, what bothered me was the possibility it exists, but yeah.
So too much on.
It just happened.
well,
An article.
no.
But it's true, it's a compromise.
Seattle Coastal Intelligence now doesn't exist, so what the.
One more thing, it never.
No, it exists.
It's their,
That's not
and
it.
also too, the tax people